In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam Lambert here, and I am extra excited to introduce to you Mr. Darryl Edwards, who is our guest today. And if you don't know Darryl, you should. He's a sought-after expert in the health and fitness, and his work has captured the attention of national and international media. He's charismatic and eloquent, as you will hear. He's been published in titles including Men's Health, Women's Health, The Independent, Elle Magazine, Men's Fitness, The Daily Express, popular podcasts like this one, and online summits. Darryl is featured on the BBC TV series Eat to Live Forever, Doctor in the House, and films We Love Paleo and the Human Longevity Project. This was an absolutely great interview, and I know I got a ton out of it. I hope that you guys do as well. And without further ado, here's Darryl Edwards.
And we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Darryl.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be finally catching up.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a long time coming. Yeah. So I'm trying to think about the first time we met. I'm having to dig deep in the archives, and I think it was Primal Con Tahoe. Does that sound right to you?
It was. Yeah, it does sound right. Which we're talking at least, what is that, 5 years?
I think
seems like it.
Yeah, at least. All I remember is that Adam and I were actually deathly ill.
The last time we had the flu.
Yeah, it was the last time we had the flu, and we were like supposed to be these specimens of health coaching, and we showed up not feeling that great. And I remember actually being upside down teaching a handstand, and there was like snot running down my face.
Well, you know what? You definitely were troopers, because I didn't. It wasn't noticeable.
Awesome.
Well, that's good.
I know in spite of my flu-ridden state, I just remember noticing and just seeing how captivated the people were with your presence and with just really what you were sharing. So I'd love for you to just give people a little bit about your background and kind of how you discovered this sense of self within the realm of play, and how and when you decided to sort of start sharing that in a professional manner.
Yes, I suppose it all begins really in childhood, and being fortunate enough to have a childhood which involved a lot of free range play. The command from your parents to get outside, amuse yourselves, come back when it's time for something to eat, and having those very long summer days of exploring your environment, and then recognizing that there was a lot more that was expected from you in terms of physical activity at school. So, trying to get onto the school team, learning all the rules and regulations around physical activity in physical education, where physical activity can become quite punishing, a regimen. Mm-hmm. So that was the kind of one of the first shifts of being very disappointed at not getting into teams, or, having the kind of punishment aspects of, drop and do 20 for whatever reason. And then I was one of the first, probably the first wave of the tech generation in the late 70s, who started to program home computers. So that was the late 70s, where home computers became available. You plug them into your TV and usually play games. And I was one of those kids who was like, I want to see, how does this thing work? So I probably started wearing glasses not long after that, because I was in front of the TV screen learning how to program. And that became my career. So I did computer science at university. I then worked for software companies. I worked for Microsoft. I then got headhunted and worked in investment banking, and spent most of my career, almost 20 years or so, working in investment banking. And that basically meant I was sedentary for a significant period of time at university, for one, and then also post, in the working environment, working in investment banking. It was 16 to 18 hours a day, every single day, getting paid phenomenal sums of money for the bank to get their pound of flesh.
Right.
And one year I had an annual health check, and was told, Mr. Edwards, you're pre-diabetic, you have elevated risk of cardiovascular disease because your lipid profile is really off, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're anemic. I was suffering from musculoskeletal problems, so I had chronic low back pain, pretty much 2-3 episodes a year of being bedridden and having
Wow.
lots of pain relief. I was wearing knee supports, so because it was uncomfortable taking flights of stairs, my knees, my kind of legs would kind of give way, my knees would give way. So, I had high blood pressure. So, literally the doctors were like, okay, don't worry, Mr. Edwards, we can resolve this with statins for your cholesterol. We'll give you some beta blockers for your blood pressure. We'll give you some supplementation for your anemia. We'll maintain you on the meds, the Valium or diazepam for the muscle spasms, the pethidine for pain, the opiates for pain. And I was just like, this is like a cocktail of meds. Is there anything else
Wow.
that we can do to resolve this? Metformin, I missed that metformin for the blood pressure. The blood glucose to bring that under control for the pre-diabetes. And I was like, is there anything else we can do? And it's pretty much like, no. Okay, how long do I need to be on the meds for? Until the end of your life. What about the side effects? Don't worry about it. If there's side effects, we'll give you something else. So I was just a coward. Thank goodness. I was a coward when it came to taking pills of any sort. And even I remember, even when I was taking pains for back pain, it just didn't seem to work. I mean, I was dosed up like on Valium, which kind of knocks you out. You tranquilize it, knocks you out, and I still felt significant amounts of pain. So I remember questioning, like, is this really doing me any good? Apart from me feeling drowsy, I still feel as if I sneeze, if I blink, I'm shrieking in pain. So
Crazy, because I
yeah.
just can't even imagine you, the Darryl that I know, like in this story. It's
Yeah,
just
well, the
like,
good thing is there is a silver lining to that cloud, which is I said no to taking the doctor's advice, and I do remember one of the worst numbers I had was for my blood pressure. So I remember my doctor saying to me, "We almost want to admit you to hospital immediately because your blood pressure is so high." And I always used to say to him, "Oh, well, you do know I've got a really stressful job, right? And I've got deadlines to meet and blah, blah, blah." And he'd always say, okay. This is, it's just temporary, isn't it, Mr. Edwards? Yeah. I'll do some yoga retreat, in a few weeks. You know what I mean? I'll go on a break. And so that was the turning point, because I remember realizing that I'm sure I've read somewhere that physical activity is a great way to manage blood pressure.
Right.
So maybe I need to stop being as sedentary as I am and start exercising. So that the gateway for improving my health was actually through movement, was through increasing the amount of physical activity that I was doing. It wasn't through food. So I had a significant health transformation just moving more. And so my blood pressure came down. I was no longer pre-diabetic. My cholesterol numbers were improving just through movement. And then on the back of that, I remember thinking, okay, my health's improving, but what else can I do? I need to start looking at my diet too. I need to start looking at other things that can improve my health, because I don't want to take the meds. So, and my doctor at the time was like, there's nothing you can do. You're getting older. There's a genetic predisposition for all these ailments. It's going to happen. And I was like, well, maybe I can hold it at bay at least. And so the first batch of results came, the first blood test came back looking really promising. And it was like, oh, you're no longer pre-diabetic. Like, really? What have you been doing? What meds have you been taking? None. Who else have you seen? No one. So that was a turning point. And that's when I started to question a lot of what was conventional wisdom around managing, chronic lifestyle disease, or early onset, as I like to call it, because it wasn't full blown, but there was definitely the issues appearing that I had no idea that I could control just through lifestyle intervention.
So
Yeah.
I'm picturing someone out there listening that's, can identify with this sort of the before
Mm,
version of you, and
mm,
who's out there and, is maybe in this similar situation with a high stress job, or just maybe doesn't have 100% control over their time and their ability to really manipulate their schedule and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering, like, when you first started making these changes, what were some of the like low hanging fruit, if you will, the things that the way that you were able to actually get this work or this play or this movement and these dietary changes into your life in those early stages?
yeah. So I suppose, I mean, when you're pretty much sedentary from dusk until dawn, I would say it doesn't take much
Mm-hmm.
to realize a significant improvement in your health, because our physiology, one of the foundations of our physiology is based on movement, on
Mm-hmm.
our requirement to move. And so in the 21st century, where we don't have the necessity to move, i.e., I don't need to hunt for my food, I don't need to build my shelter, I don't need to, be nomadic and walk significant distances to access, more food resources. I don't need to do that nowadays. I can just sit and survive. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
in our ancestral past, that wasn't a possibility. If you just sat there all day waiting for things to happen, it wouldn't be long before you're either going to be, somebody's meal, or or you
Yeah.
would have access to food. So yeah, just moving more for someone who's sedentary, who's somebody who's office based, is
Mm-hmm.
significantly important. And so it wasn't just my time in the gym. So that's what I joined the gym. I spent most lunch times going to the gym, fighting the culture at work. I mean, it was the amount of the backlash that I had daring to spend 30 minutes in the gym.
Mm.
It was incredible, because you were at work, you were meant to stay at work. If you had a sandwich at your desk, that was spending too much time in self-care, right? I
Wow.
mean, while you're eating,
Wow.
just work, carry on working. So that was the environment that I was in. So I almost had to be a little bit under the go stealth mode, and not make it very obvious that I was in trying to improve my health by going to the gym, and blocking out time in my calendar. Oh, I've got a meeting. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but yeah, I had to really prioritize making small changes. But the great thing, even within that environment, and only having 30 minutes in the gym, it meant that I had to become aware of, say, high intensity interval training, because it was like I don't have much time. So I need to do as much as I can in the shortest amount of time possible. And I've got to make sure that my training program is quite well rounded. I don't want to just do 30 minutes on a treadmill. I want to lift weights. I want to become more familiar with what my body's capable of. I want to focus on health and longevity, not just aesthetics, because I kind of looked okay. It wasn't, I didn't have a driver for, improving my body composition that much, even though I was a skinny fat individual. So I had high levels of body fat, but it wasn't visible, mainly visceral fat. So yeah, so I kind of looked okay, but obviously wasn't okay. So yeah, I was forced to try and do as much as I could in with lots of time constraints, and recognizing, okay, if I am going to be eating, I need to make better food choices when I am grabbing something for lunch. And maybe I do need to make myself have a much better breakfast, because I can't rely so much on what I'm going to get in the office canteen. So
Right.
yeah, so the low hanging fruit, I would say, for myself, was moving more, and especially if you're in an office environment, is deciding, say, I wouldn't send emails to my colleague who was sitting 30 meters away. I started to not take the lift or the elevator from one floor to the next. I'd start taking the stairs. I would, and I would start to enjoy the ability to do so. Like, actually, I'm enjoying leaving my desk and, running up a couple of flights of stairs to have a chat with my colleague rather than picking up the phone or pinging an email. So I had lots of incidental movement in my day. I left the car, more often at home. I decided to walk one or two stops before getting onto public transport, for example. And so I felt I wasn't really taking up much more time, but I was getting much more movement into my day. And
Yeah.
interestingly, I didn't, some people assume that I I had to leave banking in order to become healthy. And I actually spent several years still within that environment and learning how to manage, improving my work-life balance. So I didn't become like a monk overnight and go on Tibetan retreats or anything like that. I stayed within that very highly stressed environment, a very cutthroat environment, very sleep deprived, which was one of the issues also. That's where I actually improved my health significantly because I wanted to prove that it was possible, even within that environment. And then there came a point where I started falling out of love with that work environment. And also I felt that I wanted to, people started to ask me what I was doing. Why are you eating that way? Why are you exercising in this peculiar way? Tell us more about it. And I didn't feel qualified to do so. I didn't feel as if I could give health advice. When people say, you had diabetes or pre-diabetes, what do you recommend I should do? So I spent some time cross training. I became a nutritional therapist. I became a personal trainer. I started kind of studying and researching and becoming passionate about lifestyle change and encouraging others to do so. And initially, I thought nutrition would have been my main sort of selling point, gateway for people. But actually, I recognized it was movement that really did it for me. And so initially, I focused on what I believe to be fitness elitism, focusing on those who really wanted to focus on performance and training like an athlete and being as physically literate as possible. That was my initial goal. I wanted a black box gym with a handful of members who could pay me huge sums of money. Probably targeting investment bankers, to be honest, was my initial idea. And then, I identified a problem with myself, which was I was already somebody who was highly motivated and driven, and so my work ethic became my gym ethic. And I was overly stressed at work, then being overly stressed in the gym, being overly disappointed, highly competitive, would hate the person next to me who was better than I was at any movement or workout. When I say hate, I don't mean dislike.
Yeah.
It was real hatred.
Oh, interesting.
And so if I was injured, which also happened on a regular basis, I was infuriated with the whole process. So I didn't enjoy the process of becoming more physically active and becoming fitter. I only enjoyed the end result and the goal. And so that was probably the second stage in my transition to what I do now, was focusing much more on the enjoyment of movement and thinking about me doing this for the rest of my life and thinking about play and cooperation and enjoying the moment and being more mindful about the pursuit of fitness.
Did that come in one moment where it was just like, bang, that, that sense of, wow, I'm doing this, but I'm not enjoying it? Did that hit you sort of all at once, or was that a gradual transition into just sort of noticing, I feel happier when I'm playing or when I'm enjoying this movement versus taking it so seriously?
Yeah, it was. I suppose it was a gradual transition. And I remember I was in a process of becoming, there's a gym called Jim Jones, who are based out in Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And I became familiar with their work in the early 2000s because Mark Twight, who's the kind of head coach, he trained the actors and the stuntmen in the movie 300.
Right.
And so I saw some of the earliest training videos whilst the movie was being made. And the director was talking about how he wanted the viewers to believe that these individuals could go to battle. So there was an emphasis on functional training. There's an emphasis on not just how somebody looks, but how they move, almost like the choreography of movement, and training for life, not just training for, just to be fit without any purpose. So that was a light bulb moment for me. And I did everything that I could to train at his gym. And I'm talking like emails that weren't responded to for 18 months, like doing everything that I could, saying I would pay whatever I could. It was like it's not about money, Darryl. I remember some of the emails, which are fantastic when I think about it now,
Yeah.
because it just increased my desire to want to join.
Yeah. It was like Fight Club. Everybody just stands,
Yeah, exactly.
standing on the front porch until they let you in,
Exactly. It was brutal. So I went through that process, and I wanted to open the first Jim Jones facility, or the only other facility. They have one in the US, and I wanted to open one in the UK. And again, it would have been appealing to elite athletes. It would have been appealing to those who really want to push themselves physically. And it was whilst I was in, like the third or fourth stage of a certification. And I remember I was spectating the individuals taking part. And I remember I had a really good, amazing workout where I was like second on the leaderboard out of, say, 12 people. And some of these people were like, national level athletes in a particular event. So of course I couldn't hold anything to them in their event, but in a particular workout, I was second on the leaderboard. I remember thinking, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this former geek and nerd is holding his own against these guys who've been training all of their lives. But it just felt, at the same time, it felt very vacuous. It felt like that was the only thing that I enjoyed about that process. And I remember seeing somebody who was like laid out on the ground, like throwing up, and there was no sympathy for this person. It was like, look, he's just weak. That's the reason why he's all laid out. I remember thinking, there's something this doesn't sit well with me. And I started to think much more about, say we were doing a box jump. And I remember thinking to myself, like, there's nothing, I enjoy jumping, but I don't enjoy box jumps.
Yeah.
I enjoy climbing a tree more so than just doing pull-ups or muscle-ups. So that was part of me questioning that and thinking I want to be doing more crawls. I want to be lifting people up rather than just Olympic weights. I like firemen carrying people. I like piggybacks. That's
yeah.
Piggybacks to farmers carry, say, or farmers walk. So it didn't take long. It took a while for me to consider that as an option. But once I recognized that when I was a kid, I really loved movement. I longed for the knock on the door of my friends saying, "Hey, do you want to come out and play?" And I never said to them, "Oh, you know what? We had a hard day of play yesterday. I've got muscle soreness, I've got DOMS, and I need a couple of days rest." And do you know what I mean? Like, oh, we did we did a heavy back day yesterday with all those piggybacks. So maybe we need to. So there was nothing. There was no fear that came around not doing it the right way, not doing, not having periodized training and not training, the resistance day one day and aerobic and cardiovascular the next. It was just, let's do what is fun. Let's do what will hopefully not bring anyone to my parents' door saying that I got into any mischief. That was pretty much the only things that were, the rules. The guide, right. Come home when we tell you to, and don't bring any trouble to the house. And we exploited that fact. So but it was a heck of a lot of fun. And so I wanted to recreate that as an adult. I wanted that feeling again. And I wanted to have that feeling again, but with the additional knowledge as to what the benefits of fitness and movement are, actually have some goals and say, I'm not just doing this for the sake of doing this. I do want to become a better kind of version of myself physically, because I was previously very, very underutilized in terms of my fitness potential or physical potential. So I wanted to have that. I wanted to become more primal. I wanted to become more adept in terms of general preparedness. And so play just became the best vehicle for me to do so. And that's how Primal Play was born. So Paleo Fitness was my first book, where I wanted to talk about, if paleo is a kind of a human species appropriate diet and a more natural diet for humans, then arguably moving in a particular way, moving like our ancestors, is also something that we should be modeling in the modern era too. But then I recognized that there were so many people who are left out of that equation. When you say move in this way, there were some people who struggle to get out of their chair, who don't want to join a gym, who aren't happy taking off their t-shirt, to look like a caveman. So I decided I wanted to cater for the average Joe or Jane who doesn't like exercise or actually hates it and would do anything to remain a spectator, and so I wanted to encourage people to find ways to participate which didn't feel overtly like exercise. And play, I believe, is a great way, one way of doing so, one antidote to sedentary lifestyle. And only recently, probably in the last year or so, I had another light bulb moment. So quite a few of these light bulb moments.
We're seeing a theme here.
Was when I realized that exercise is a modern construct, which is like a supplement or a substitute for the lack of physical activity that occurs today in comparison to what happened in times of yore. So previously, we didn't have to exercise because we moved in ways which meant we had a wide repertoire of movement patterns that we would undertake just to get through your day.
That's really, I think, an important point that I want to kind of hover on for a second, because this is something that we talk about quite a bit, which is, like, well, what is it? What are you training for? Like, what are you doing in the gym? Why are you going to this gym and training in this way versus, maybe something else? And a lot of times folks don't really have an idea. I mean, if they're training for something specific, great, but a lot of times it's just, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Doctor said I should, like exercise more, like eat better and exercise, or, it's just sort of what's out there for people. And I think that while it does seem sort of like a simple idea, the reality is exactly what you just said. What we're fundamentally trying to do is recreate just normal life,
Right.
Like the things that happened, right? I mean, you did some fair amount of walking and low level cardio, and every now and then you had to pick something up, and every now and then you had to run fast. And likely that all didn't occur within 1 hour, in an air conditioned facility somewhere,
Yeah.
So it's a really good point. And I think that, like, I'm stoked to hear how your approach unfolds in that, because I think that's a really key element.
Yeah, I think it's important. Everyone has to find obviously what resonates with them. And certainly for me, there was something about a gym environment when I was already spending all of my time indoors. Why would I want to have the primary facility for my physical activity to be also indoors? So it meant I was spending more time in nature, actively deciding to make the world my playground and my gym rather than just four walls, and having to respond to my body regulating temperature and me getting more vitamin D because I'm now getting some sun, and I'm gonna also be outdoors in the winter because I don't want to be just fit in the summer. Obviously in the UK we don't have the best of weather all year round, so I'm like, you start making these conscious decisions which you recognize are far healthier for your body to because you're not avoiding discomfort. You're actually deciding that for you to become stronger and healthier, there are times that you do need these acute stressors, which will actually make you more human. And so that was a second gateway really. So the play, there's initially physical activity, which is my gateway to better health, healthier lifestyle, and adding food and all the other stuff that we need to consider. Then play was a way of thinking about me maintaining my movement practice. And then finally, it meant that I was then having to decide, how am I going to continue to make this interesting? Okay, if I'm outdoors, that's far more interesting than in my living room or in my local gym. Plus, I save money on gym membership. That's a good thing. Plus, I don't need to rely on gym equipment because I have the whole world to play with. Whether it's other people or trees or walking on railings or whatever it is I decide to do. And so it just opened up a whole new world for me. And this play concept, this play theory, when you look at some of the research around play, which isn't just about physical activity, which would have been my first kind of foray into play theory, was thinking about active play. But then you start thinking about, creativity and visualization and, human interaction and social intelligence and emotional intelligence that comes about by interacting with other humans, because we are tribal people. So you have that aspect of movement, which is very often neglected in most conventional fitness norms. If you have a group of people working out, they tend to focus on individual movement. They're working out together, but they're very isolated, very siloed. And if they work as a team, it would tend to be one team versus another team. It's competition. Very little cooperation amongst the massive people taking part. So there are all these things that we lose out, that we had very much in childhood. Childhood, you're thinking about cooperation. You're thinking about how can we achieve this objective of having fun. You see somebody sitting out, you see somebody who's new to the community. Hey, come on in. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but oftentimes you're encouraging participation.
The interesting, sorry to interrupt, I just want to stop on this little piece of play as a child, because I was actually picturing myself thinking about, this play piece and as an adult versus a kid. So when you're a kid, it's totally natural. Again, you have a group of friends around you that are playing. So this idea of going outside and playing with your friends is totally normal. What I'm picturing is that an adult now who doesn't have a gang of friends to go outside and play with is now trying to go out and create this playful lifestyle. And what I'm actually coming up against when I'm thinking of myself in this scenario is like a sense of shyness or embarrassment, right? Like to get out there as a grown ass person and like act like a kid and run around and play. And so I'm picturing people out there thinking like, yeah, but I feel, the reason I go to the gym is actually because I feel safer there. Like it's easier for me to then do my workouts. It's expected. That's kind of an expected set and setting for it. But like to just go out and play in my neighborhood feels like awkward as an adult. So how do you grapple with that? And how do you help people get more comfortable not being embarrassed about playing as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some communities where you'd probably get arrested for
right?
I don't know, like climbing a tree or bear crawling, in your local high street or whatever,
Right.
So you're definitely challenging conventional norms. And I suppose the way I look at it is I think about jogging. And so jogging only became a pastime in the late 60s, early 70s. Before that time, people were not just outside running for the sake of running. You were either an athlete, which meant you were on a track, which meant you were doing cross-country trail running. That's what you would do. People weren't just running on sidewalks and pavements, unless they were athletes, right? So overnight, you had people who started putting on training shoes. So Nike made the first kind of jogging training shoes around that sort of time frame. So can you imagine the consensus at that time of people looking out your window going, hold on a second, there's that woman just running down the street. And unfortunately, not many women were involved in jogging initially. It was mainly a pursuit for men, right? So imagine you'd see somebody running outside. I'd be thinking, who is that person running away from? Why,
right.
Why am I not running as well? Why is no one telling me what's happening? So we would have challenged that when initially seen, and then over time people start talking about it. It becomes a new norm. So I feel anything that appears to be new and novel will have the same sort of reaction. I mean, can you imagine the first time those in the West saw yoga or martial arts for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I saw two martial artists sparring, you'd be saying, why are those guys fighting? You know, let's call the police. You know, you'd have no idea that they were just, you know, sparring, right?
Right.
Somebody doing some yoga, can you imagine, why is that person doing all these weird shapes out on a mat in the middle of the park? So it just takes that. This needs to be a collective of individuals who feel that it's okay to move in this way. And you could say something like parkour, which is very very playful. You know, it's not that, it wouldn't be that unusual now to see somebody jumping from one building to the next, because they've set a precedent. You know, there's a decade plus of people doing that.
Right.
You know, obstacle course racing, another way for grown-ups to kind of play a little bit more. That's now more normal. You know, if somebody's mentioned that 10 years ago, oh, we're going on these, climbing these nets and getting electric shocks and ice cold, you know, like, like what? People pay money for this now.
Right.
There's a significant, you know, minority who partake in these events. So in my local community, I was one of the first people who would go to my local park, and I had lots of, you know, inquiries from the park police saying, you know, why are you crawling on the ground? You know, we've had reports of you climbing a tree. You know, is everything okay? Like, you know, is a tree okay? Are you okay? And then people would start asking you, can we join in? You know, like, what are you training for? You know, I'm training for life. I'm training because this is just, we're just having fun. Like, really, you're actually having fun when you're exercising? Actually, I wouldn't even call it exercising. We're playing around. Oh, okay, that sounds interesting. So don't feel as if you have to be the first to break the mold. You know, start being more playful at home or in your back garden. You know, if you're by yourself. You know, play isn't just about having interaction with other people. You know, some children play by themselves too, right? They create environments that don't exist. And so we can do the same as adults. And I think for adults, they confuse being childlike with being childish. So childish makes us feel, no, I don't want to do that. It's childish. Like, you know, people are going to think there's something wrong with me. But if you become more childlike and you think about the innocent aspects of that, i.e., you're more explorative, you're more curious about the world around you, you're interested far more in what your body can and can't do. You want to learn what's possible, and you don't have to rush that experience. Do you know what I mean? So I think we're too preoccupied with wanting to just do it all immediately. I've seen your video, Darryl, where you're doing blah blah blah. I want to do that too, but I'm scared about what people are going to say. I would say, you know what? Find where you're comfortable. Explore whatever environment that you feel happy exploring, and start to cultivate that playfulness again, because most of us have lost it. Most of us put it to bed when we were probably even early teens. We put it to one side. So it's not going to come back overnight. Just like I didn't become a fit individual overnight. I had to work really, really hard. And now I play really hard to try to maintain that. So, if you don't have a friend or friends or family who are willing to join your playful path, then try to cultivate it yourself, and don't shout about it too much. You know, dance whilst no one's watching, right? You know,
right.
do that at home. You know what I mean? If dancing is your way to become more playful, wait till everyone's out, put on your favorite, you know, song from whatever era that you love, and make sure no one comes home before the song's over.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
You've got children.
Totally.
Use your children as a proxy to become more playful. You know, ask them what games that they play. Introduce them to games that you played as a kid, because unfortunately, a lot of kids do not play the games that we did as kids because they've been banned. You know, they've been told that they're not safe. You know, they're not allowed to jump rope in the playground. In the playground, because they might fall over and graze their knees. You know, they can't climb trees.
Is that a real thing? Like jump rope is?
Oh my
Wow.
gosh, it's crazy.
You would be surprised at, and unfortunately, the US lead the way, like
Yeah.
in many things that can be detrimental to us. But yeah, that's one of the things that
Yeah.
that the Americans are pushing for significantly, reducing recess time. Like in some schools, recess doesn't exist, so no playtime at
That's
all.
crazy.
And they remove jungle gyms from playgrounds. They remove jump rope, because even tag has been banned in many school districts, because
Yeah.
it could be seen as violent. One person touching
Microaggressions. Yeah.
Right.
So this
Yeah.
is really interesting, because I mean, if we think about the God, boy, this is just like the nail in the coffin for for the standard American, and unfortunately, like you said, we export a lot of the worst. Like our primary export in the U.S. is bad ideas. I mean, some of them are good ideas, but a lot of them are bad ideas.
There's some pretty good ones for sure. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's unfortunate that we don't discern the good from the bad sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So imagine, I mean, we've seen this problem in nutrition, right? Where, both Vanessa and I were fortunate enough to grow up in families that cooked. So that was just a thing. But now there's less and less of that, right? So kids that are growing up now, there's probably not as much cooking going on at home. There's so much more processed food that's available. So much, everybody's busier, all the reasons. And so they're not getting access to that as an idea. So these are adults who are like, when they grow up, they're like, I have no idea. What do you mean cook? Like, this isn't even something that happens in my world.
Exactly.
And what you're saying here is pointing to the same thing being the case for these children who grow up with never having had the opportunity to really play, and do this. So now they're adults, and like what Vanessa's saying, she's just trying to get over the embarrassment of playing. She remembers how to do it, but she just feels uncomfortable doing it in public as an adult. But now these kids coming up are going to have no idea.
Yes.
They don't even know how.
They're not going to have the play memory.
That's actually
the muscle memory
that's
associated with playing. And then, I mean, I as I say, I do focus on a lot of the research. I cover a lot of research on my blog. But kids who are play deprived, in terms of research, are more likely to be violent, are more likely to, as adults. They're more likely to suffer from mental health issues and depression and anxiety, more likely to have ADHD. As youngsters, more likely to commit suicide. I mean, there's significant risks to our mental health and physical health by not having the appropriate amount of playful activity as young kids. So there were significant dangers, which over and above kids just not being more, physically active. They're becoming, we're pushing them to become much more academic, to be much more work focused. And so they're missing out in many areas. We could argue that's the case, but they're missing out on a lot of what's great about childhood. And so like yourselves, I was fortunate enough. I mean, I had a stay-at-home mom. So pretty much every meal was home cooked, freshly cooked. She spent her days sourcing healthy foods. And she didn't know anything about nutrition, but she was always like, she would always avoid anything that was prepared out of a box prepared, right? We went out for meals once in a blue moon. They were a rare treat. Water was our main beverage. If we ever had I remember we used to have soda pop deliveries. This guy used to come once a week, almost like in the UK we used to have milk deliveries to the doorstep, and they used to have the equivalent with soda as well, and they used to come once a week. And my mother would say to us, like, you're not getting any more. This is for the whole week. You're not getting any more. And we used to finish it on the Monday night.
Yeah, of course. That was it.
Yeah, the whole week supply in one evening. But then we were forced to drink water, so probably nowadays it would be classed as child abuse.
Yeah.
But to say no. But we had some lessons that I think set us up in some respects in adulthood. And some kids now don't have the benefit of being primed and being given some of the tools, which mean yes, it is good to to sit around your table with your family and eat what's been prepared for you, and to be really grateful for the time and effort put into it, and to be coached by, even I helped my mother out on occasion. My sister's far more than I, but my parents always used to say, like, Darryl, you don't assume there's always going to be someone, preparing a meal for you.
Right.
So that's why you have to learn how to do this. Mom, really? I want to go outside and play football. No, 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 no. Learn how to cook, blah, 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 blah. And
Right.
I'm grateful because once I started preparing food again as an adult and not popping it in a microwave, it all came flooded back. I could go to my mother and say, Mom, I remember when I was like 7 and you taught me how to cook this. What do I need to do again? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yes, yes, yes. So I'm thankful that I had a little bit of that. And I think for our kids now, we need to be letting them know that it's okay to explore the world around them. And of course, we are more concerned. We are more likely to be helicopter parents now than our parents probably were when we were kids. But we need to give them some time, unsupervised, to learn about the world around them. We do need to spend more time. If we are taken to the local park, maybe we need to spend less time on our phones, pretending to supervise them, and actually interacting with them more when they're playing. Or deciding, what, rather than me sitting on my phone on the bench, I'll probably go for a little walk, and kind of watch them from afar and let them, risk assess and to deal with managing their peers and all the things that are not easy to do, but are far better to do through learning than being thrown into the deep end and having no idea. And I think that's probably why we have more cases of, say, bullying and social media targeting, because kids aren't interacting as they used to until they have access to technology. And then all of a sudden they're bombarded with, oh my gosh, I've got all this power and I have no idea how to control this. So I mean, we could go on a rant for ages about this. But
I think that's a really interesting point, because it's one of the things that, and I'm sure everybody's experienced this to some degree, but it's in the internet world, people say things to each other that they would never say in person, or at least that's my interpretation. Like, I would never say that to somebody in person. I would be really shocked if any of these people would say these things to someone in their space. And I think you're 100% correct in this, that they didn't have the experience of making that mistake in real life and like having to deal with the consequences of like really pissing somebody off for saying something that was just like completely off the cuff or whatever,
Yes.
And so without that immediate physical feedback, and I don't mean this like violence, but like just the physical communication back and forth as youngsters, how do you know? Like, you're right. How are these guys supposed to know what's the right way to behave in a social environment if the only interaction that they've had has been, policed to a point that they weren't able to make any of these mistakes,
Yes, exactly. I totally agree. And I mean, again, I could talk about, some of the interesting stats around kids. There are more kids admitted to ER falling out of bed than falling out of a tree in comparison to a generation ago. So those are like official stats from the CDC and the National Vital Statistics Bureau in the US, and it's similar in the UK, unfortunately. So kids, there's no rough and tumble play. Kids struggle to get out of bed without twisting an ankle. I mean, it's almost farcical mistaking this, but it's actually, unfortunately, it's fact that that's the case. So, we need to be careful that we're not wrapping up our kids in so much kind of cotton that
too much bubble wrap.
too much bubble wrap, and then we we release them out into the world, and then we're surprised when people really struggle with reality and rejection and no, and the hard, that the adversity that can occur in real life when they're no longer protected. So
So what's a couple of things, like I want to leave our listeners, with a few things that maybe it's 3 things that you do every day that you try to do and make sure that you get to these, top 3 things to create more play in your life, or just to create better overall health and well-being in your life. What are like 3 things that, the listeners out there can try to do that will make a big difference for them?
I would say I try to get out of bed differently every day. So,
Mm,
I don't drink coffee.
hmm
And so I try to have some vigorous activity as soon as I wake up. I'm not a morning person. I really struggle in the mornings. But that's when we should be the most alert in terms of, the cortisol cycle should be
Hmm.
elevated. Serotonin should be high. We should be ready to go. And so have felt fairly flat. So I will start off my day doing anything vigorous and exciting by rolling out of bed, jumping out of bed, crawling out of bed, deadlifting the bed, whatever, whatever the challenge. So that sets you up, I would say, for a more playful day. If you start off your day like
hmm
that, no matter what, it can only get better, in my opinion,
Yeah.
on that basis. And whatever happens throughout your day, you can always go back and go, well, actually, as bad as my days become, at least I started off by deadlifting the bed or star jumping
Yeah.
out of the bed. The second thing is I would is to recognize that health is multifaceted, and whatever you do not focus on just one area to the exclusion of
Mm,
others. So, if
Mm.
food's
mhm,
your thing, don't just think if I just eat a perfect diet, I don't need to worry about being active, being focusing on my sleep quality. It doesn't really matter as long as I eat well. Similarly, if exercise is my thing, don't just think I can eat a poor diet and mask it with a really great workout regimen. So I think you've got to spread yourself thinly when it comes to
Mm.
lifestyle choices, in my opinion. Make sure you're covering as many bases as you can, and you'll be a healthier individual than focusing on just one or two areas. And the third is focus on simplicity. If you've got to become, have become a PhD researcher in all of these areas to get better, to get healthier, there's a problem. My
mhm.
mother is very resourceful, cooks really well, very healthily. She knows nothing about nutrition. If I ask her what a carbohydrate was, she'd be looking at me with a puzzled look, and she has no idea, right? But yet she knows what's healthy. She's been taught lessons from her grandparents, and so I think sometimes just going back to basics is really important. Don't chase the latest
Mm,
workout program when you know
Yeah.
you're actually just being sedentary right now. So rather than looking for the perfect
mm,
workout program, probably just moving would help. If you're not sure what diet
right.
to eat, maybe just deciding it can't be good eating cookies and soda drinks all day. Just preparing something fresh, just making decisions to buy food that you have to spend some time and effort and energy converting to something that you want to eat is going to be a healthier
Mm.
decision. Then you can worry about the details afterwards if needs be. So those would be my top three. You know,
Awesome. Yeah. So tell, pardon me, tell the listeners about your newest book and where they can find you.
yeah, my latest book is called Animal Moves, and it's basically teaching you that if we move more like the rest of the animal kingdom, we'll become more human. So,
Mm.
if we compare ourselves to the animal kingdom, we're not very good at movement, i.e., cheetahs can outsprint us, wild sheep can outsprint us. Ants can carry up to 100 times their body weight. We struggle with 2 or 3 times if we're very, very strong. Kangaroos can outjump us, dolphins can outswim us easily. The rest of the animal kingdom make us look, ridiculous when it comes to specialisms in movement. But um, you know, what's pivotal for us as humans is that we are jack of all trades and master of none. We can perform all of those movement patterns, crawling, jumping, climbing, lifting and carrying, we can do all of those things averagely, but it makes us the most adaptable and the most adept at movement. And so I wanted to use
Mm.
this kind of that paradigm in this book to say if we move like the animal kingdom, if we model the animal kingdom, we'll actually become more human. We'll become stronger, fitter, faster, healthier in doing so. And you can find out more about that at animalmovesbook.com. It's available in all good stores, good bookstores, and bad ones as well. So,
That's awesome. I really, I have to say, I really like that as a concept.
hmm
It's like moving more like animals. Animals will make you more human, and it's so on target with what we generally believe and have seen work for folks is like the bottom line is that person in the cubicle behind the computer screen in this just cast fixed position is not probably the highest expression of your humanness.
Yes.
You know, and just like pigs need to root around and eat grubs, humans need to do human things,
Exactly.
you know, and fully express themselves. So that's
Yes.
amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today, Darryl. And hopefully folks check him out at primalplay.com, correct?
That's correct. Yes, primalplay.com. So there's lots of research, lots of ideas, lots of examples of how you can become more playful, not just through playful movement, but just in life in general. And also the research kind of backing that up, which is of course important for many of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the research is it's one of those critical pieces that ties it together for a lot of people. You know, and there's a few that are like, well, this sounds cool, I'll give it a shot. And there's others that are like, I don't buy it. Where's the, you know, triple blind study?
Yes, yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So that's awesome. Well, thanks again, Darryl. This has been fantastic. And I at some point, I think we should do it again.
Yes.
And let's just really dive into some of the psychology piece of this, because it's something that I think is super, super interesting. And you know, even if just for selfish reasons, I think it would be cool if you're game.
Oh, well, that'll be a pleasure. It's been fantastic. I mean, it's been almost an hour, I think, and it's gone by very, very quickly. So hopefully it will
so
be
fast.
Just the same for the listeners too.
Yes, absolutely. All right, folks, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.